Hello, and welcome to the NOTstalgia podcast.
A podcast where we discuss the retelling or continuation of pop culture favorites as seen through a queer and feminist lens.
My name is Eric Lefebvre.
And my name is Jessica Tercero.
And this week, we are joined by Larry Freed of the My Favorite Movie Is podcast. He is a podcaster. He is a filmmaker. Larry, welcome to the show.
Hello, I'm here. I'm on the show. It is such a thrill to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming to talk about this IP. Do you want to dig us into what we're talking about today?
It would be my honor. We are talking about Planet of the Apes. Specifically, we're going to talk about the 1968 original film directed by Franklin J. Schaffner, I believe his name is, starring Charlton Heston. And then we're going to break down the creme de la creme, the first installment in the Planet of the Apes reboot trilogy, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, directed by Rupert Wyatt. I forgot to put a period at the end of that sentence just there. But there
we let it ring out, waiting for
a little bit.
The tension.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that is because I was like, okay, cool. There's Planet of the Apes, and then there's the Tim Burton remake, and then there's and the original Planet of the Apes has like a bunch of movies after it, and then there's also like this new trilogy where I was like, oh, okay, did they like do it like Dune style or something where they like break it up into a trilogy? Are we doing The Hobbit? Like, what's going on? But no, it is a prequel set in current day San Francisco.
Technically speaking, yes, it is and we can. I'm so excited to talk about this, but it is technically speaking a prequel to an alternate version of the events that are in the 60s. Because in the, I mean, oh my God, should I start going down the rabbit hole? Do we want to preface a little bit? Or?
Before we jump in fully, tell us a little bit about your history with Planet of the Apes as an IP, like what got you into it and why you love this story.
So first of all, I just want to say right off the bat that I love your guys' show. I love the show. I love you too. You're hilarious and wonderful. And I'm really excited to be here. And one of the reasons I love your show is because it's about something I'm kind of obsessed with, which is like adaptation and continuation in storytelling. And what I like to think of intertextuality in storytelling.
Oh, yeah.
For those who don't know, intertextuality, it's like it's technically a literary term. It's like when one text references or relates to another in some way, but we use that term in film all the time as well. So intertextuality in film is a huge thing for me. Every time there's a movie in a movie, I'm like, now why is that there? Who put that there and why?
Yeah.
And so what's great about your show is it basically looks at two films and basically looks through the intertextuality between the both of them and also looks at adaptation, between both of them. And it's what's so interesting about your show is it's very broad. You guys have talked about originals and sequels. You've talked about, like you had the Little Women episode where you talked about the same story told two different ways. You had the Force Majeure episode, which I haven't listened to yet, but I really want to because that is a really fascinating example.
Such a good film.
Yeah, Force Majeure is chef's kiss. And so when we were talking about me being on the show, I was asked by Jessica to think about some of my favorite sort of, continuations, retellings of films. And a little while before we had started talking, I had watched the original Planet of the Apes. I had revisited the film after a very long time. And just thinking about the movies I had seen recently and like, oh, what's still relevant? What can I talk about? I felt like I smacked myself in the head like, duh, you need to talk about the Planet of the Apes reboot trilogy. Because again, I'm not going to go too deep into it, but like to me, the Planet of the Apes reboot trilogy, it is a paradoxical gold standard, but also a complete unicorn. Like it is a completely unique, in my personal opinion, it is an entirely unique situation in which you have filmmakers looking at this point of an incredibly tired property. I don't think anybody was looking at Planet of the Apes and being like, money, They've made 5 movies. Most of as after they went on, they all started to fizzle. Then they tried to remake it and it got shat on to oblivion. And nobody was thinking like Planet of the Apes would be something interesting to reboot. And yet they tried it and they did something I'm literally getting like I'm trying to contain my excitement because it's like whether you love the film Rise of the Planet of the Apes or not, like the boldness and the intrigue of the story is like something you never see right now. Like we live in an era right now where they sort of are doing all of these legacy sequels, or as some people call them, the reboot quels. This idea of taking beloved properties, bringing in legacy characters and new characters, and being all like, ooh, look at what used to be, and now it's now. You know, like, there's so much of that. And Rise of the Planet of the Apes, before that really became popular, if we're being honest, they took an original IP, did something entirely new with it. Something that like any studio right now would probably be like, what the fuck were you thinking? This is dumb. But they injected this story with an entirely new sense of life while also still clearly paying homage and alluding to the original and in some ways sharing a lot of thematic similarities. And obviously we're talking about Rise, which when I first saw it in the theater, it like blew my mind when I first watched it. It was like I would like to think it was a pretty formative film for me. I'm not going to put it like in the upper echelon, but it was one of my favorite movies that came out that year, and it was just like, and this was before I had any knowledge of the original Planet of the Apes films. But I just watched it and I was like, oh my God, this is it. And then the other films, Dawn and War, had similar effects on me. Even though Dawn is technically my favorite of the trilogy, Dawn is like low-key a perfect movie. Whatever, we don't have to get into it. Rise is just this. Like you look at Dawn, and Dawn already has that prequel movie. You know, like Dawn can do whatever it wants. You know, Dawn said it had a whole new chronology, but Rise was like, we're going to try this. We're going to try taking this idea and doing something totally new with it. And whether or not other versions of this exist, because there's been some examples of like reboots of stories that go in an entirely different direction. Like I'm thinking about like the Jumanji reboots, for example, is a pretty solid parallel. Those are parallels that take the original property and clearly allude to it and have a similar spirit to it, but are very, very different. But the problem is that most of the time that has like varying results. I think a lot of people saw the Jumanji sequels and were like, that's not my Jumanji, and they totally dismissed it. Planet of the Apes does not have that same sort of nostalgic air to it. I think a lot of people it's very popular. A lot of people know about it, but I don't think there's this like heart beating out of your chest fanboy love for that franchise. And so I think that's what gave the filmmakers the license to try something new with it. And I think we got something that's just, oh my God, I can't wait to talk about it. It's one of my all-time favorites.
At least not with like our generation, right? Because like I remember, so like my experience with the property is I remember going to the theater to watch the Tim Burton Planet of the Apes, and my dad was incredibly excited because he loved Planet of the Apes, and I had never seen the original. I don't even think I knew at this point that it was, well, I guess I did know because my grandma always had like the Sci-Fi Channel on, like Dune was my shit, right? At Dune and Sliders and all of that. So like I knew about it and I was like, okay, cool. Oh, new one. And I watched it and I was like, okay. Like it wasn't like anything special. I have no recollection of it now. I was looking at it the other day, like the cast and everything. I was like, this is wild. But yeah, so that's kind of my thing. I've never seen the original. I knew that they came out with this trilogy, but like it wasn't really on my radar because I was like, well, I mean, that 2001 one was awful. So like, why would I even bother? So it was just kind of like one of those like, I know it exists, but it is not for me.
Yeah, I mean, similarly, I'd never seen the Charlton Heston one. I only knew it from lore and like the general idea and that twist ending and the damn you dirty ape. Like obviously as part of like the zeitgeist, 100% in my brain. But I'd never seen the actual film, so I'd only understood it as a twist, but not as like a story. So this was like a first watch for me. But apart from that, and seeing Rise of in theaters when it came out, and that was also a year after I moved to I did. And it was a year after I moved to San Francisco. So for me, I remember being in the theater and being like, oh! Like,
okay, during the movie, I was like, wait, there's redwoods? There's redwoods over there? Like, what
they're
the
like,
fuck?
Oh, they're at Muirwoods? Sick. Oh, they're on Twin Peaks? Sick.
Oh, I didn't know that. I did not know that you live in that you moved to San Francisco. That is so funny.
Yeah, so I was like, it was like right when I had moved there, and then like they're like fighting on Battery Street, and I'm like, oh, I work
Yeah.
around the corner, fucking cool. Like, it was fun in the same.
I could have been
felt,
there. Those apes could have been throwing potholes at me.
Literally. Well, part of me also that was, and low key, I wish that this was also back when I was doing some background work. And I cannot believe I missed the casting call because that's another one of those that was like filming in town, and I just missed it, I guess, because otherwise I'd have been there. But then my only other experience with the IP at all is the Misfits song "Forbidden Zone" from Famous Monsters. Even though, what is that guy's name? Not Glenn Danzig, but the other one that everyone hates now, rightfully so. I forget his name, too.
I'm not gonna
Anyways,
get it to you.
He's like a fucking silly
We both
like
lost our
anti-vax
punk card
Trump
right now.
Trump racist asshole.
I'm not the guy who's gonna take the punch
Michael
card.
Graves. Fuck Michael Graves forever.
There we go.
Michael
okay,
Graves.
thank you.
But
Keeping that name in the
that's-
brain bank now.
But that song fucks, and it's really sick. It's called The Forbidden Zone. It's literally about Planet of the Apes.
Is it? I fucking never knew that.
Yeah, it's just
Oh
a
my
song
God,
that he wrote about
okay.
Planet of the Apes. So that's my only tie
Cool.
to it. But apart from that, that's
That's
all I got.
great. I love that. I love that you went into this movie with just that frame of reference, and you were like the Leo
I
Cat
know.
meme when they brought up the Forbidden Zone. You're like,
boo.
that's the
Yeah,
thing from the
literally.
song that I like.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Very
100%.
fun.
That
Very,
was
very
me.
fun.
Okay, well, I feel like we're ready to just kind of dive in. What do you guys think?
Let's
Yeah.
get into this.
I'm so excited. Let's talk about these movies.
In 1972, a small crew of 4 was sent out on a deep space mission traveling at the speed of light for 6 months, making their estimated return to Earth 700 years into the future. However, something goes horribly wrong, and the crew awakens from their cryosleep to find themselves on an unknown planet over 2,000 years into the future. After escaping their sinking spaceship, the 3 surviving crew members, Taylor, Landon, and Dodge, travel across the desolate land searching for signs of life. Luckily, they don't have to look too hard and soon find water, vegetation, crops, and a primitive tribe of humans. Almost as soon as they encounter the humans, they are all ambushed by a group of closed, armed guerrillas on horseback. Dodge is killed, Landon is missing, and Taylor is injured. But ultimately, they are all captured with a handful of their other humans. Fun!
Taylor's wounds are treated by the Ape City surgeon Dr. Gallen and animal psychologist Dr. Zira, where humans are treated as mute, inferior animals. Though Taylor cannot speak due to his throat injury, Dr. Zero quickly realizes Taylor is different from the others. Eventually, they begin to communicate which, by ape law and religious doctrine, should not be possible or tolerated. As a result, a trial ensues to decide Taylor's fate, and though Dr. Zero and Cornelius try to defend him, the two find themselves sharing in his sentence as they are accused of heresy. They flee and are followed to a cave on the coast where they find evidence of human intelligence predating the ape empire. The cave is blown up to hide the evidence, and Taylor finally has his freedom. Oh yeah, and Nova is there too? Taylor and Nova ride off into the sunset only to discover the Statue of Liberty, meaning he's been on Earth all along. Damn
Bum,
you,
bum,
dirty
bum.
apes.
Seriously though, like, damn those dirty apes.
Damn those, goddamn them straight to hell.
Well, actually,
even.
damn human beings, honestly, but also
Yes.
the ape, but also
I mean,
the apes.
truly.
True.
Yeah.
Okay, first of all, I want to say, right now, with what is happening in Ukraine and with Russia and with all of these tensions rising, the talks of nuclear forces being put on high alert, the second film being about an airborne virus, I'm like,
Oh,
y'all,
yeah.
I don't know.
I
know.
hate to break this to you, but this movie never is not relevant. I'm just gonna put that. And I mean, to be fair, I did not remember the viral pandemic part of Rise as
Yeah.
much. So like watching it now is like, oh my god,
Well-
what did I do
Well,
to these
but
poor
also,
people?
I was like, this is not how a pandemic works. Like, that would have spread like way faster. I know
Yeah.
this now. Excuse me.
But I as soon as that last moment, like that post-credit scene of him going to, I mean, we'll get into it in the other one, but yeah, I was also just like, oh shit.
Yes, literally. I was
go.
like, oops, always relevant. I felt
Yeah.
the same way when I watched Jaws during the pandemic. I was like, nope, this movie's too close. Too close.
Yeah, too
Yeah.
close. So Charlton Heston, how are we feeling about this first one? I want to say first and foremost, I'm obsessed with the casual nudity. I think it's so great. I love, because again, in most movies, it's like femme-centered. Like, not that that's bad, but I feel like it's like, well, guys can't show anything. It's like, but we're gonna objectify the ladies. And in this one, it's just very clear. Like, there's a whole 20-minute sequence of them butt-ass naked and them working really hard to make sure that no dick is present from bushes, from branches, from rocks. Like, the cinematography to make sure that nothing shows, genius. It's it's so well done. But that's my first thought about
and
this
I love
movie.
that their first thought was like, oh my God, there's water. Let's take off all our clothes and go jump in it. And like, they were like so comfortable being so naked together this whole time. I was like, here for it. I was like, great, excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's actually, it's a really funny sequence revisiting that, where they're like, they have to like walk around sort of. I mean, this movie I think first of all, I think this is a great film. It's not like one of my like, whoa, like favorite of all time, but it is a great film. And it's because, one of the reasons I should say, is because it has so many moments of just like very subtle visual imagery that sort of just like really makes you think about the themes of the 18 different incredible themes in this film. But seeing Taylor and his gang just immediately get naked in the water, it's like, okay, they're already there. Like they're literally visually already bringing them to the point of ape or animal, which perfectly sets it up for the honestly horrifying ambush sequence later on. But yes, also Charlton Heston has a rockin' bod, as do the rest of them.
They do. Yeah. It is really gorgeous.
Absolutely.
No, 100%. Like the shredding them, and also it's like the animalistic aspect of like, we're equals now, but also most vulnerable, and especially in this sort of tide turning of power struggle that we're seeing with the apes and the people. It is a perfect place to set them up for like, oh yeah, here's the adventure. Boom. I also, overall, the music was really well done. It was the right, perfectly tense, perfectly orchestrated, like them exploring the Forbidden Zone before they finally get to the scarecrows on the rock, like all of these angles of them on these dunes and like the long shots, and you're watching them go down, and it's like this pedestal up, angled down moment. It's like there's so many cool and wonderful shots that are only accentuated by the tension of the composition of the music. I was more impressed than I thought I'd be by it.
Yeah, there's same. Like, I don't know what I expected or why I didn't expect it to be cool. And maybe it's because of the awful introduction I had with Tim Burton, but which, we love, right?
Paul Giamatti. And
but
I honestly, I feel so bad that your first introduction to this IP was the Tim Burton film, because
But you know what? I mean, watching this kind of saved it, so it's fine. Yeah,
I'm
I do
so glad, truly.
There's like you were talking about, Eric, where like there's the cinematography with the music cues, with like even when they're crash landing on the planet again, and there's like that 5 minutes of the world literally turning upside down, right? And the way that kind of sets up this tension. I think that was really good. And I think that there's also a lot of like really good metaphors and like symbolism in the very beginning, where like we're literally watching humanity's ship sink from the very beginning. There's no hope, right? And what I thought was super, super interesting was their obliviousness. Kind of, you were talking about how like they're kind of regress back to like their animalistic nature, right? When they see the water and they just like get butt ass naked and like fall in and stuff like that. Like the way that they like treat life when they find like the all three of them picking up the vegetation, the first sign of vegetation that they find, right? And then being just totally oblivious to like the people that are following them, having their packs stolen. Like so much of that, I think, really is telling about the story and how it's going to go and what we're going to see happen, because their packs are stolen, right? Their equipment's broken. They have nothing. And all of that was taken from them, even though it belonged to them, right? So in that moment, that's also their identity, right? Their identity is stolen. And that's like a big conversation later on in like the trial and stuff, right? And to think that when they landed on this world, the way that they presented themselves and the way that they acted was as if it belongs to them and like nothing can hurt them. Like they, as these American men, cannot even fathom the idea of something being dangerous and not for them. So they've just decided that this is for them. They literally plant their little toothpick flag in the ground, because this is a story about men, 100%. Like,
and just how it echoes in that first line of him sitting on the ship being like, I'm so alone, I'm so lonely. Like this sort of existential idea of like, I've left everything behind, I'm on this mission, I should be feeling good, but why am I feeling so alone? How that individualism and that individualistic sort of ownership of things is so isolating that like everything that he's done has been for self-interest. And suddenly he's like, why do I feel this way? And it's like, what's not clicking? That's why you're so alone. That's why you're so lonely. And these actions are reverberated at every turn, every moment. Like, I shouldn't be afraid. I'm going to get this and whatever. And even when he's in captivity with what is not Zola.
Nova.
Nova.
She's now mine. I'm going to fuck her. I'm kissing her because I want to.
Right?
Yeah. Even with the femme ape scientist. What was her name? Zira. With her, like, can I kiss you on the mouth? Like all of this,
that
he just
fucking
thinks
pissed me off so much. It's like,
so
where
bad.
am I?
That
like,
part
literally.
is so bad.
Like,
so
and
bad.
gross and weird, and it all stems from this idea of like, everything's mine. I can take what I need and whenever I need it because I want it.
Which
and
is
then
so
he
interesting.
wonders why he's so alone and so isolated. It's like, because you are literally everything that is anti-community and anti other people. Like, you do not consider other people. Empathy is not a word for you. You exist in this bubble of self-interest.
Which is also incredibly wild because like the film starts with him talking about how much he hates people and how he's like, the thing that he hates about them is their lack of community, right? Like he's like, do wars still exist? Are the neighbors' kids still starving? And I'm like, okay, great. But like, this is literally all about you. Like, everything in this world is about you and for you. And you are actually like, you and like-minded people are what ultimately like led the world to be destroyed.
Well, I just love that at the end of the day, thematically, it makes perfect sense because he starts alone, he ends alone. But at the end of the day, it's like, I love that it turns on him and it's like, fuck, like, I tried to get away, I tried all of these things, and suddenly I'm still here, except everything's gone, and I'm the most alone I've ever been in my life. But even in that moment of existential panic, he's still just like, fuck you, apes. It's your fault. I fucking hate you. You guys are the worst, and you're the reason that this is. It's like, no, it's you. You're the problem. And I like that as an intentional theme throughout this story, because he is not a likable guy.
And
he's
he
our
can't
hero, but
outrun
he
it.
is not likable, and he can't outrun it.
And let's just put it out there, he is not the only character that suffers from this problem. This is a problem that countless of the characters in the film suffer from. Really, all the men. Or all the main major male characters. And first of all,
except for Dodge, who was in the movie for 5 minutes.
Correct.
Right?
I'm every major male character. Except for like maybe the son. Is it the son or nephew or like
the nephew?
The nephew. Yeah. He's like doesn't really have enough of a character to really go into it. But like you have Cornelius. You have what's the name
Cornelius
of the
has to be egged on by Zira in order to take a stand and in order to
Cornelius is entirely self-interested in his scientific research, making his way up the hierarchical ladder in the ape society, not being cast out. And then Dr. Zaius, I remembered that guy's name. Dr. Zaius.
Dr. Zaius.
He is maybe the most self-interested guy in the whole movie, and it is his self-interest that causes all of the deep cognitive dissonance that surrounds this entire society. And I think this film is so thematically complex and so sociologically complex. I think if there was a sociology class, this is a movie that's got to be on the curriculum because it just covers so many bases. But like, I think that's what's really interesting and why I love that we're on this topic of discussion is because all of the sociological elements of the film, like, you know, religion and faith, like the butting heads between that, how we treat other, like basically the parallels to animal cruelty, even though it's really fascinatingly being put towards human men, and not only human men, but like the ideal human male person. Like Charlton Heston basically represents like he's attractive, he's got a great body, he is driven and and very individualistic, which like some people wouldn't call the ideal male, but it's like kind of this like it's
the
this,
prototypical
like,
of popular
yes.
an archetype of masculinity for sure.
Absolutely. Yes, exactly. So like, but what's
especially
great is
in
that
the 1960s.
Oh, 100%.
Truly.
All
and
of these
he's white.
things and he's white. And he's white. All of these things ultimately come from the self-interest of people. Self-interest, especially male and masculine self-interest and imperialist self-interest. And this is also in Rise too. I feel there are vibes in Rise as well about this, and really throughout all of the films. It is this, I think a lot of people are weary about wary about stories about straight white men and their follies. And it is a very tired genre. Like I'm not going up to bat for them, but there are some stories, in my opinion, that being this archetypal masculine character is essential in order to break down the utter hypocrisies and follies of these kinds of people. And I find that Planet of the Apes, again, we can talk about the female characters in the film next, but obviously this is not a perfect movie by any standards when you look at it through a 2022 lens. And I think that a lot of people would maybe misinterpret this film and maybe look at it as like, oh, and go look at this, another straight white man, ruins everything. But this movie is in my personal opinion, in terms of filmmaking, this is a pillar movie. This is a movie that is so much a perfect example of just the tragedy of self-interest, especially of basically coded imperialist self-interest, male self-interest.
Yeah.
And it's just so strong in that way.
Because truly with this storytelling, in the end, nobody wins.
Exactly.
Yeah. Nobody wins. Everyone fucking loses. And it's because at every turn, these choices by these conflicted, self-interested, imperialist-minded men making these choices. And ultimately, that's the downfall for literally everybody. I mean, again, Dr. Zaius is still we have to hide this so we can stay in control. Whereas Charlton Heston's no, we have to show them because whatever, we were here. And it's a well-crafted story for that reason, and I like that Charlton Heston's character is so unlikable. All of these male characters are so unlikable, and the intent of that, and that being an intentional choice, is fantastic because it really does dive into that conversation, especially after the trial, and you hear Dr. Zaius be like, I know this, and it's why didn't you say, and
that
so you're getting all
so
of these...
good. It's so good.
You're getting these scenes
that...
of self-interest, and you're like, ooh, ooh, ooh.
I really like that Taylor does not get away with anything. He's leaving Earth because he's I can't stand these people, right? They're going to ruin everything. Just be nice to everybody when he's kind of an asshole to everybody. So he runs away from that. And then he gets in his situation and he's fucked over by the situation. And then as soon as he gets out, he is ultimately fucked over by his entire race, right? By the human race in general, by and at large. So now he has Nova to fuck and to populate or whatever, right? But he literally has to sit with himself and be my people did this. He doesn't get a good ending. Even though he escapes all of these different fates, he still has to sit in that and sit in the consequences of white men.
Of white men. Yeah.
The ending of this film is just it's already iconic. We all know it's iconic, but it is incredible. There is not a single movie that is made right now that has an ending quite like this. And I was just staggered by the last 20 minutes and on, because we have this whole scene. They're in the cave. They discover all these artifacts. They're you're wrong, and they're right. Case closed, basically. And what happens? The huge violence. They blow up the cave. And then Charlton Heston basically's you know what? Y'all are not going to change. This, you're going to continue to perpetuate this system and society that you live in. And nobody seems to have any power or agency to change it, really, because you're so stuck in your ways. I'm just gonna go. He literally, just as we were talking about Taylor being self-interested from the very beginning, at the very end, he's me and my fuck buddy Nova over here are gonna leave, and we're gonna go figure something out. Even though, where the hell are you gonna go, dude? At this point, it's nihilistic to the utmost degree. But Zaius gets untied, he rides away, and then the ape, it's just gonna resume. The cycle is not broken.
Nothing has changed.
And that is such an important choice. If this movie had ended the apes are free now, thank you, white man, it would have just defeated the purpose entirely.
And I think that's the biggest part about this, right, is in almost every way the ape empire is truly just mimicking humanity in terms of government, in terms of the way that they use animals or things that they deem lesser than, right? And like the way that they hold trial, even their language is English, right? Which like I knew that it was going to be Earth, but I was like, well, actually, I didn't know because I was like, I know that that's a line, but I don't know what like Planet of the Apes that's from, the ending. So I was like, these fucking dudes are English, and this is one of the reasons why sci-fi is my favorite genre, because it has always been a place to push forward and push back on societal norms in a way that
100%.
I think makes it a little bit more interesting and more palatable. And I do think that there are films that are coming out now that are doing that and doing that to this level.
Yeah,
but I
will
think
never
that they just aren't as widely known or, in the zeitgeist yet. But like, I do really think that it's interesting how the apes like declaring supremacy over humans and over just the entire world, all they're doing is just mimicking humanity, and mimicking the same people and the same things that led to the end of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I want to reiterate the idea of like the hero's journey in this of like returning having changed, and the pivot on that is returning having not changed. Nothing's changed.
Yes.
Everything's the same because of this very specific type of person. I was so impressed by it for those reasons. Like, it really intentionally took that and said, fuck it. No, that's what happens. That's the answer. That's it. Everything moves on. Nothing's different.
Sci-fi is like, when it's done well,
Yeah.
it's just the most punk rock genre, truly.
Well, sci-fi fucks.
Yes.
Yeah, sci-fi's sick
Yes.
because literally you can kind of do whatever in any sort of way, as long as what is integral to most stories is the humanity and the empathy and the idea of like seeing oneself or finding oneself in some kind of journey here. Oftentimes it is the hero, but within that, you can play, you can do whatever the fuck you want.
And like one of the takeaways I have from this movie is that this is a whole world. This movie's a whole ass world. Like like you wonder why they made 4 more movies. It's because you could have expanded. Like these are the kind of worlds like sometimes I'm watching a movie that's so audacious and they're so complex where I just say to myself, "Oh, I'm watching Star Wars." Like I'm watching I'm watching an equivalent of Star Wars. Like basically like somebody who had such a deep understanding of one's own world. I feel that way when I watch Lord of the Rings. I feel that way when I watch Southland Tales. I feel that way when I watch this movie, because this movie is just, there are so many corners. I could watch a movie about a random guard in this universe and how he lives his life, and maybe there's a power struggle between some of the guards and like the thing or whatever. Like that's enough of a story. There's so much detail that you can have a story there. And so you're seeing all these things play out. The brilliant production design, brilliant costume design, everything has details. You notice that like there's colors, like people are like color coordinated, and they're species coordinated. So different species of monkeys have a higher part in the hierarchy, which is kind of also alluded to in Rise in a few ways.
Which is something that I also wanted to bring up is another way that the ape, in my notes, it's the ape establishment. Another way that they mimic humans, especially of the time, is through their racism.
Yes.
So the monkey hierarchy, right? We have the orangutans at the top, and they're all leaders, and then we have the chimpanzees, who are doctors and everything because they have like, their brain works better or something, right? And then the gorillas are literally just the muscle, right? So like even within this, not only do we have racism, but we also have like a society that's built on that racial class structure, which is again just another thing that they saw humans do.
It's literally just a predication on eugenics. That's like the whole conversation.
Is.
That's
and
all
like,
it is. Which is interesting because at a certain time, especially as this an allegory for humanity, there was a time where there was sort of in a white supremacist state this expectation that like we're in power because we're smarter, and they try to prove it scientifically. In the way that we're seeing this, that power structure is still in play in this other way, but it hasn't been discussed or dismantled or proven to be incredibly false, just based and rooted in straight racism, right? Yeah, it's cool. It's an interesting
and what I love about it is that it's not talked about at all. No one needs to feel the need to
No.
say anything about it. Like, there's no, like, here's how the race class system works in this universe. The orangutans are at the top. How many movies do we have where it's like, let me break it down for you?
Well,
These guys are at the top.
Yeah.
There's no need. You immediately understand it because there's just the body language, the costumes, the colors. It's immediately clear when you're watching it. Like, oh,
it's
okay.
It's
I
a
think
movie
that's something that
yeah.
older films did a little bit better, whereas now
100%.
now we have a lot more exposition, and now we need to know exactly why this what this one device does and everything. Where I think that it's stronger storytelling, and I think Eric and I have talked about this a lot. When you just run with it and you trust that your audience is smart and is going to pick up on this, and even if like they don't pick up on the racial disparities between like the different types of monkeys, they they understand like the color associations, kind of like you were talking about, and things like that, right? So that all serves the greater purpose, and that's when people like us can get in there and really fucking dive in.
That's why it's a movie that works well, because of that one. That's a huge part of it, is trust your audience, right? Like, don't spoon feed too much. Like, give what's necessary, but ultimately let it speak for itself, and let it, because again, color association, we're going to see that, and we're going to pick up on that to some degree, and it's going to make us wonder, and it's going to be like discovery. It's like, it's inviting us to explore the space that they've created in a way that's interactive, and also it builds the story, it builds the world, and makes it feel more realistic and more realized, which ultimately is a great thing. Like, I want to explore this space, and like you were saying, the idea that like this guard could have this whole other side story. It's we're witnessing a world that is complex and so unique and intrinsic and so fascinating. So like, let us play in the space. Do not tell us too much. Give us what we need, and then let us kind of build our own path. I do want to dip into the misogyny. You touched on it a little bit.
It's right.
Let's do it.
It's right.
Because I feel like that's like a huge part of this. So first and foremost, there's 4 astronauts. One of them is a woman. One of them is not white. The spacecraft crashes and she dies. We find out she's dead. Bada boom. Later, it's brought up that she actually wasn't really even a scientist. She was kind of just a fuck vessel for the men to repopulate this unknown plane, which it just is so unnecessary, because you've already killed the one woman with any sort of like what is established here is like intellectual credibility. This scientist, this pioneer of the stars, you kill her immediately. But then later it's like, no, she actually wasn't a scientist. We were just gonna fuck her. And you're like, okay.
And to me, so in the very beginning, right, when Charlton Heston has his whole little monologue, and he's just like, oh my God. And then he takes a second to look at each of the crew members. He lingers a little bit more on her. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to give this the benefit of the doubt, which I don't normally do in films, right? I'm like, I'm going to give this the benefit of the doubt, because they're on a science exploration mission, right? All of that. Great. So, and he did look at the other characters, right? Normally it would just be, he looks at the woman longingly, and then boom, goes to bed, and then we know there's romantic tension there, right? But in this one, I was like, oh well, she's a scientist, like maybe that's it, cool. And then literally when they're like, oh, she's our Eve, she was supposed to be our Eve, so you're the last of the line, buddy, and we were supposed to repopulate with our charm, and I've had so many women, oh my God. And I was like, what the fuck are you doing? What the fuck? Like, why did we need to like even have that in there? Like, just say she was a scientist. Just don't. And this is a moment where just don't say anything at all.
Literally.
If you have nothing nice to add to a character, a marginalized character, just don't fucking say anything. Just don't add that.
It's truly because like you already killed her. What else are you gonna do? Like, she's already dead.
And they made her like, so she was beautiful before, and then like when she's like cronish, right, when she's like decomposing and stuff, then and she's no longer beautiful, then she's of no use, so she's just like done, because
she's literally not a person, right? Like, we've established that she's
none
an
of
object
the
for
women in this are.
She's an object for repopulation, and that was her mission. That's her directive. That's why she's here.
Except for Dr. Zira, but Dr. Zira is off the table because she's not a human, right? But then at the end, it's like, oh no, but like I still do want to bone you, actually. So right in front of your fiance, just like make out with me, just like just do it. And I was like, that doesn't make sense, because like he's there with Nova, who originally Dr. Zira puts this woman in the cage with Charleston Heston, and she's like, oh my gosh, they're gonna mate. Ha 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 ha, I'm gonna make them mate, right? This is going to be lovely. And she's all giddy about it. And Taylor decides that, all right, there's a woman here, and they're like spooning, and it's fine, right? But then he decides to, like, because she can't talk, he names her. And then he like starts having this weird ownership of him where he says that she's the only one that's going to listen to him. And he's like, but I don't have you anymore, because she was physically taken away from him, right? And he's like, do you love me? Can you love me? Like, that doesn't matter to him because she belongs to him, right? As far as he's concerned. And then there's a moment where like he belittles her and tells her that she's not smart. And then she smiles and he's like, at least you do that. I taught you how to smile, right? And that was like the grossest fucking thing to me. And then like all she does as a character, like we don't see her get to do anything except literally all she does is follow him around. And then she also, like, when he's like writing in the sand, she covers all that up, right? Like she as a woman is actively sabotaging him without even realizing it, right? So it's like her actions are literally just stand here, look pretty, fuck his shit up, and just smile and look helpless.
I understand what they're trying to do for this character to make him, I mean, granted, is it intentional to have these characters there for him to objectify, to make him look less likable, or is it to make him look more charming or desirable? Because I think in a lot of these older movies, that is sort of the intention with the sort of womanizing and misogynistic aspects of these male characters, having the sort of the big air quotes charisma to sort of be so overt and be so like, wow, honey, you should smile more, or like kiss me and like grab the, you know what I mean? So
all
can't
stories written
tell.
by men.
All stories written by men, yes. And so that's also the thing is like, obviously he's a bad guy, intentionally bad. The whole reiterative has not changed that conversation. But I do think that this was supposed to add to his charm. It was supposed to amplify the sort of charisma that he has, the machismo that he's sort of giving, and that sort of confidence boost.
Totally.
She's supposed to be that for him.
But then
it's so bad. Like, it's just really the whole time too, because it's supposed to be like, oh, this romance, like she's just like helpless and he's like big strong man, but like she says not a single fucking word.
Not a
and
word.
The whole time too, we're seeing like this, again, big air quotes, romance blossom on screen. It's really just him being like, hey, and then the next scene they're like spooning and he kisses her and he's like, hey, and then later she's like smiles and he's like, I taught you how to smile. And you're like, no, who?
And for a film that is talking so much about humanity, right?
Yeah.
And where humans are treated like animals, right? You would think that there would at least be some sort of defining factor in the different people, because we do see a lot of different people, right? A lot of different humans, but all of them are like indistinguishable from the next. So in a movie that's trying to make the case for their personhood and all of that, it just like is treating them, really wrote them as animals.
Yeah.
Like, this movie's very intentional and very well crafted. But again, moments like that where it's like the intent versus the impact can vary significantly. And it seems like at best, she's there to show us that he's an absolute buffoon monster man. At worst, it reinstills the notion of masculine supremacy, misogyny, and the objectification of women, right? So you have to like balance what
you gotta balance.
I don't know. Yeah, it's balanced, but similarly, it is also, like Jess was saying, intent, right? Like understand what these things mean for somebody who's like viewing them for the first time, and how that's going to instill a way to exist within that, especially male writers, because often,
and that's also part of the male gaze, right?
It's part of the male gaze,
because Taylor is written as a character that you as a man are supposed to project onto, right?
Yes.
So the female gaze does not exist. It is always a man looking at like, this is who I am and who I would be in this narrative.
Yeah.
So that also kind of works to exactly what you're saying, Eric.
Yeah.
I will say that I do think that Dr. Zira is a very strong character, and she is female,
awesome. She's
and
great.
she is wonderful. So kudos to that,
Props,
because because she is really great. It just sucks that the human women are all objectified and just there to make babies, but the one woman that is incredibly capable and smart and everything is off the table, but he still has to make out with her anyway.
I still hate that. I hate the moment. Totally unnecessary. Why?
Isn't it the weirdest scene? It's like the weirdest choice.
It is the weirdest scene, and it's right in front of Cornelius.
Yeah.
I'm like, why, dude? Why?
Because even when he asks, and then it's like she looks over at him and he looks over at her, and they're like,
and at least she says like, yeah, but you're ugly.
yeah, right. Like
that's kind of funny though. That shit's kind of funny.
I loved that moment.
that.
I was like, good on you, girl.
It's a nice way to subvert the weird tension, but even still, as a scene, I could not agree with you guys more. It's very misplaced. I'm like, wait, what? Why? Like, why did he have to kiss her?
There was another moment that was a little bit weird for me, and it is the moment where I think he's talking to Landon in the beginning, kind of like when he's calling him out on his shit, like, oh, well, you only came for glory. I came because blah, 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 right? But, like, there's this laugh that Charleston Heston does that is just like seems incredibly maniacal out of nowhere, and I'm like, wait, okay, is he crazy?
Like something like that? Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm like, what's going on? What's going on with you? Like, and then that's the only moment that he starts to show like a little bit of insanity, and I was like, okay,
yeah.
That's another one of those. That's a perfect moment of like, did they intend something with that? Because it's not translating super well. That didn't even take like 40 years to realize. That was immediate. People were like, nope, that doesn't work at all.
Yeah.
I just want to mention one more scene that is just one of my all-time favorite comedic scenes in otherwise not very comedic movies, is when they're talking about flight or whatever, and it's like, a plane, a machine with wings that can fly, that's impossible. And then Charlton Heston as Taylor just throws the paper airplane, and it makes a hill and it falls on the ground. I had to pause the movie. I was laughing so hard. I was like...
It is truly the perfect throw. Like to exemplify exactly what happened. It's like
okay.
It is.
But how many times do you think they did that to get that perfect throw?
Too many. Yeah. But it's a hilarious moment, but it's also a perfect microcosm of the story. It's like, what? That's impossible. Oh no, it's literally right in front of you. It's a perfect, just like comedic beats. Dramatic movies like this can't take those kinds of comedic beats from actual comedies. Like leave it like it's unfair. It's not fair. The greatest comedic beats of all time are going to be stuck in Planet of the Apes.
Yeah,
like, come on.
I mean,
some room.
it is nice too because it does break up some of that the tension of it. Like because it is like moments are sinister, moments are intense, and then this moment where he's like, whoop, it's like just. Like it's
Cornelius and Zira, like, and they're kind of like Cornelius, you know, like the kind of like couple mentality is very fun. It's a great way of introducing the characters into the film.
The boulder scene was incredibly hilarious to me when the boulder and they're just like running for no reason. That was pretty good.
Yeah.
I also want to say how fucked up it is that Dodge, the one who was
this was the last thing that I was going to say.
By the pursuit of, arguably the one who was the most pure in this whole thing, right? Landon was in it for himself and the glory. Taylor was in it for himself and glory. Dodge was in it literally for the pursuit of knowledge. We see how excited he is just literally running around the planet just to look and explore because he's so stoked. Both him and Taylor are shot in the neck, but Taylor survives and is treated, and Landon is not. Landon is instead
gilded,
taxidermied and stuck into a museum.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, that, to be honest, though, that kind of is perfect because, like, I mean, thematically speaking, like the idea that the character who is pursuing knowledge.
I just hate that it was the black character. If it was,
that part sucked. That part sucked.
Switch the actors that played Landon and Dodge, and cool, perfect, excellent, awesome.
Yeah, I agree.
You know?
I agree.
Yeah,
faux pas for sure.
Because truly, by like, if you subvert that trope of like killing off your black characters first, would have been gorgeous. I mean, because again, he's maimed and like. It's still not a good outcome.
And arguably a similar way
it subverts
that
the trope.
Taylor is, right?
Yeah. But I do agree that, like, yes, killing the one who is the most knowledgeable, most indulgent in seeking truth is such a nice little...
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's scoot over to the next one, right?
Yeah.
In current-day San Francisco, pharmaceutical chemist William Rodman is struggling to cope with his father's Alzheimer's and desperately working on a drug capable of reversing its effects on the brain. The lab he works at, Genesis, has been testing his latest viral drug on chimpanzees, and just when it seems they finally made a real breakthrough, one of the test subjects breaks free and is murdered in a hastily put-together investors meeting. As a result, all the test subjects are to be euthanized, and it's back to the drawing board for William. But wait, it turns out the murdered chimpanzee was a mom hiding her baby from the lab workers. Refusing to take responsibility for what happened and start over, William takes the baby chimpanzee to his house, where he and his father raise it as their son, and William starts using his dad as a human test subject for his anti-Alzheimer's drug. Cool move, dude.
After a few mishaps over the years, William's dad starts relapsing as his body forms antibodies to the Alzheimer's drug, and Caesar becomes a clothes-wearing, angsty teen chimp. Genesis has begun chimpanzee trials on the next miracle drug, except this one is ultra potent and toxic to humans. Oh no! Meanwhile, after trying to protect Rodman Sr. from a shitty neighbor, Caesar is sent to live at an abusive monkey sanctuary. After having a hard time fitting in, he decides to expose the group to the new Genesis drug, so all the monkeys become super smart, and together they decide to break out and head for the redwoods, destroying anything in their path.
Okay, so this is the moment. Let's dive in. Larry, you have the
Start us
floor.
off.
Okay. So, like, look, this, like, where do I even begin? Like, I am so, and maybe I'm just going to kind of get passionate about it here because I'm so tired of where the film industry is right now.
Yeah.
And the sort of the era that we're in right now. And the fact that this movie exists in its current form, whether or not you like it or not, which we will get into, is a fucking miracle of miracles. Like, this movie to me is a miracle. There's like a kind of a throwaway joke in screenwriting where it's like, how do you take a story and tell it new? Oh, you just do it in reverse, or like, you know, or just change the perspective, you know, like, or whatever. That's literally what this movie is. That is what this movie does. This movie, there are very subtle moments of imagery in the movie that make it, that confirm, air quotes, confirm that this movie is a prequel to an alternate version of the events of the 1968 film, which we just discussed. So for those of you who are paying attention, there's a newscast about a rocket that flies up to Mars, which is what Taylor's initial mission was. Then newspapers is lost in space. And so technically speaking, these movies are a prequel to an alternate version of the events of Planet of the Apes. Obviously not the original films, actually, because the original films take place in the 70s, or the mission starts in the 70s. But to me, that is like almost reductive, like almost borderline reductive a way to think about these movies, because those first of all, those references are very ancillary. They are not at all relevant to the plot of the film, to be honest, and really are more valuable thematically to the film and not plot-wise, like thematically in the sense of like science can go wrong, ? Like that's really like what those moments help to instill. They're way more valuable that way. But also just like, if you showed both of these movies to somebody who has no familiarity with the IP and they just watch them, I don't think they would like draw these corollaries. Like obviously there's like, oh, they're both about apes. They just kind of feel like sister movies, not like that they sourced from the same material. To me, like, this is just, that's why I said it's like, it's a gold standard while also being a unicorn, because this movie does not rely on the original. It does not pander to fans of the original. Besides for those little Mars, you know, cutaways, which is, by the way, very light pandering, you know, and it doesn't even feel like pandering. It feels like the filmmakers were like trying to almost pay homage in a certain way. There are a lot of homages to the original film, like for example, the ape, the mother ape, Caesar's mother in the lab is called Bright Eyes, which is exactly what Zira nicknames Taylor when he's in containment. And there are a couple other allusions to that as well. And so it doesn't feel pandery. It feels very artistic, very intentional, a lot of these choices. But basically what I'm skirting around the point is that this is an entirely original story. This is an original take on the events that would lead up to, even though again I don't like using that because it feels reductive, but it is basically like a story. It is an original story. This movie to me is most valuable as just a movie. It's just its own unique, beautiful little thing. And as I watch it and I think to myself of the certain era that we're in right now, I'm like, why can we not approach things in this way? I feel like there are so many properties and IPs and stories that through this methodology could be injected with so much life in a way that has more returns than sort of the way that we're doing it now. And I'm not going to act like Rise of the Planet of the Apes is as sociologically complex as Planet of the Apes is. Definitely not. But that being said, I don't think it really is trying to be or wants to be. I think this is, while Planet of the Apes is a sort of its own universe and is sort of about Taylor, but really about this whole world, this is a story about Caesar. And that's why we start with Caesar and we end with Caesar. Like, that's a great rule of thumb. Like, if your movie should start and end with the main character, that's who the main character is. And so these movies, especially when you get to Dawn and War, the second and third film in the trilogy, this is the story of Caesar and literally the rise of the ape, the ape contingent, and Caesar as the leader, and what the journey Caesar has to go to become a leader and understand what it means to lead this group of apes, but also understand how to develop himself and his relationship with humans and all of that. And I think that I'm almost jealous of the simple genius, I think, of this choice. It's incredible.
I feel like I really like the idea of this being a completely different movie. I wish they would have named it something completely different, because then I probably would have. I think that is something that really does hold this movie back. But yeah, absolutely. Like, maybe I should watch the others, because I don't have any reference except for this movie. And I like Caesar's story. My problem with it, and I think that this movie does the same thing in terms of the main character, right? Or the main human character, I'll say, where Franco, he's just fucking Franco in all of my notes. I'm sorry. It was just him on screen.
Yeah, totally.
But like, the white male is centering himself in all of the conflict in his life. He refuses to take responsibility for anything and makes it all about him. So the reason that he has to do this drug, and fix Alzheimer's is because of his dad. But it's not because of his dad. It's because how he feels about his dad, right? And he's not really centering his dad in that. He's centering himself. And with Caesar, it's not about like, oh, I can't euthanize this poor cute little baby. He sees the drug in the baby, and he's like, oh, well, here's my test subject, let's go, right? And so he has Caesar at home, and I think that this is a really good origin story for Caesar, right? Where he then, takes him because he's different, right? And he locks him up. Like, sure, he has his like cute little attic playroom, right?
Which to be fair, I want that fucking
cute.
room.
I do want that room.
It's so cool.
I do want that room. But he is performing tests on Caesar, right? And he's doing all of this in secret, and he's lying to everybody about it, even his girlfriend, which I think she's the one character that is trying to recenter Caesar in all of this, where she tells Will, like, hey, yeah, sure, this all this stuff, but what about Caesar? You're not centering him, and how dare you fucking lie to me? Which I think she is incredibly intelligent, and I think it is bullshit that she did not know that he was not licensed to have a chimpanzee, and why would he take this chimpanzee to her in kind of like a backwater way and like don't tell anybody. I think that really did do her a disservice, especially when right from the get-go she says that she both loves and fears chimpanzees, right? So she's so much more intelligent than I think the writing did for her, and all she kind of serves to do is just be a love interest, so we can say that there's a woman there that's capable. But I really liked her character, and I wish that she was in more of it to be that opposing force against Will, and just continue to recenter Caesar in the conversation and make maybe have Will kind of reconcile that within himself.
Not to be a fool, whatever, but also like truly anybody but James Franco. Not to be like a total asshole, but like
No,
the
I know.
story,
I
again,
know. It did not
from-
age well. It did not
from-
age well with Franco in the
with
in the
Franco,
lead.
it's I get in that moment when he was kind of all the rage, it would have made sense, but like in hindsight, it really is like this complex movie, and then Dave Franco doing like kind of sloppy acting bits between these like really intense moments, because literally everything with Caesar, the development of everything, it was so impactful to the point it was hard to watch, right? And like that's the point, is him being isolated, him being pushed aside, the moment of him with the chalk window in his cell, like
So good.
leaning against the window, like
So good.
tears. It's so sad. And the moment too when he's like, oh, he's back, I'm gonna like go home with my dad and it's gonna be so exciting, and then he doesn't get to go, and it's like another heartbreak, and then finally that moment when he shuts the gate on him, when he's there, he's like, we're going home, and he sees the lead, she's like, fuck no. Like it's just the development of Caesar's arc, like character arc, like how he grows into his own, into this autonomy, into this leader. That whole portion of this movie is fantastic without a doubt, and it's really inarguable because of the way that they show these really heartbreaking bits, and you see the strife, the struggle, and these moments of just like absolute depression. But when it's centered around James Franco, it immediately for some reason just takes me the fuck out, because really like. And also, I just truly wish that he was a little bit more likable. Like, again, going to what Jess was saying about how he's so self-centered and all this stuff. If he were a little bit more empathetic just in terms of centering Caesar, again, it would make this so much more complex and harder to watch, because...
Or even his dad. Like,
or even
you
his
know,
dad.
He's like, oh, I don't know if this is going to work, but let's try this. Like, and he ultimately, his ego is what kills his father. Right?
Yes. Can I just rebut?
Yeah. Let's go. Rebut
First of all, great takes all around. Love it. I will admit, on this viewing, I definitely lost a little bit of my spark in Franco. Now, granted, obviously, after everything that's happened with him, not fun watching him lead a movie. But I agree that there are a couple of moments where, like, just the apathetic James Franco-ness kind of rubs off on some of these really dramatic scenes. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm not gonna lie.
Like it's like a
tough.
really intense scene where he's like he's having to contemplate like the most intense situation. Like, my dad might die, and I'm like maybe a father now, and he's just like like the malaise and this simple.
I
like,
agree.
Apathy
he was
is
not
so...
the best casting. I will agree with you. Not the best casting. However, to rebut something that Jessica was talking about, we talked a lot about in the last film: self-interest, greed, how all of these things can poison societies. Whether or not this was intentional on the part of the filmmakers, because I do think that the filmmakers are trying to make you empathize with Will's character and a lot of his choices in a modern context. No. Even though the film is very aware that what he's doing is not okay. Obviously, like, when David Oyelowo's character finds out that he's been experimenting with his father with this drug, he's like, I could fire you in 1 second. But of course, money. So he's like, keep going,
but
keep
did
going.
It work?
But it didn't work. Again, but like David Oyelowo's character is another great example. Like, we talked a lot about self-interest, and I do think that is a valid interpretation of this movie that I think really does help that side of it. And I will fully agree with you that when Caesar's going and it's all Caesar, this movie is like firing on all cylinders. It's just amazing. And I will admit, going back to Franco is a little bit of a bummer. However, I think it's essential having James Franco's character be there, because we need that shift in perspective and that shift in protagonist. We need that moment, because that is when it's almost like a moment of autonomy. It's like a moment of Caesar gaining autonomy and taking over the movie. And it's kind of this beautiful kind of like almost like kind of subversive storytelling execution of like, we're going to center on this human character. And then when Caesar comes in, and like James Franco's character has proven that he is beyond the point of return, it's almost like Caesar is taking responsibility of his own movie. It's like Caesar has to do the thing. And
and I do like that, because like there's literally that moment where Franco is like, this isn't my responsibility. Like he's trying to like, be like, nope. I'm here. I did, like, sure, I made this drug, but like he's really trying to distance himself from the fact that all of these chimpanzees were just murdered. The fact that that board meeting went the way that it did when he was the one that was like fucking pushing to have this right the fuck then, right? And I like that Caesar in this way is because we talked about how he starts emulating human behavior, right? And so he's like, he's wearing clothes and he's sitting upright and he wants to use a fork and he wants to sit in the thing, right? And then when he sees the difference and when he starts to like be in the forest more, be around like, you know, other people that like look like him, right? Like that's when he's like, oh, maybe this doesn't serve me. And we see him literally start to shed the bits of humanity that don't work for him. We see him take like the shirt ripped off of him, right? We see him shed his clothing. We see him get rid of the window in his cell, right? So he's starting to shed these things. And when there is that moment, and I do think that this is one of the best moments of the movie, where James fucking Franco goes in and like again tries to use his rich white privilege, which he tried to use with the lady at the animal control, and then just shoves a fucking pile of money and like waves that. He goes and he's like, you can come home with me, it's great, right? And in this moment, like Caesar realizes that he can't leave his brethren there, right? To suffer and be absolutely abused, that he realizes that he's their only chance to break free from this oppressive system, and that in this moment he really does have to leave, and that's when he shuts the gate, right? And then at the very end, like the only thing that he tells Franco, and he's like, come home, I'll take you home, I'll make sure that you're safe, which you know that he can't, right? Again, he's trying to center himself and be like, no, I can do this, I need you. He's not thinking about what's best for Caesar. Like you were saying, absolutely. Seeing Caesar say, I am home, right? And just like, and literally in this moment, like, you know, we've seen him kind of like, when he's around Franco, he's like, you know, asking for permission, and he's kind of like hunched over and he's very submissive around him. And when we see him standing fully upright without any clothes, without like, you know, having shed all of that humanity and just saying, no, this is my place, it's so much more impactful. You know what I mean?
Yeah. One thing that
Totally
I really
fair,
want to
totally fair.
point out that I think was so funny, when sorry, when he says, like where they're gonna go do something, he says, I know a place right across the bridge, and he takes her to Muir Woods. And maybe this is just like a local thing. Is Muir Woods like a secret? It's like the most popular destination for San Francisco, for anybody visiting. It's like being like, yeah, I know a place. We go to the Statue of Liberty.
Disneyland.
Like literally, it's the most common. Like if you try to go to Muir Woods any day of the week at any time, you have to park like 2 miles away because everything is full. Everyone is there.
I love that San Fran perspective on this
Also,
movie, man.
And like
so,
I have
like nobody's here. It's my secret place. It's like, it's Muir Woods. Shut the fuck up. Like it's so popular. You silly
and I
man.
have never seen San Francisco so fucking empty as it was
I
in this.
know.
I was like,
I know.
like
Beautiful.
so because
Beautiful.
I know San Francisco, because we're here, I'm like that took me out. I was like, where the fuck are all the people? Where like
Yeah.
the Golden Gate
so
Bridge
silly.
is never that empty. I don't
Yeah.
care who you are, what time it is. The street, like these streets, where the fuck are all the pedestrians? Where is the life in this city? Because the only life was just a couple cars on the road and 800 super smart monkeys.
Which is one of my favorite things about like any action sequences in a lot of places. That's all, like, feel like always it'll be like in New York City on like Times Square, and there's like 20 people.
Yeah.
And it's just like okay. Also, a couple of the lines, like the way he gets her to go to dinner, where it's like, oh, what is he saying? Like, he thinks you and I should have dinner together. I'm like, this fuck boy. What the fuck? Like, this absolute silly little man. My God. Like, and it for like leads that sort of, these moments lean into the Franco of it all. Just in terms of like dislikability or unlikability rather. And so these, I was just like, oh my God, Jesus.
The Franco of it all.
The
big
Franco
Franco
of it
in
all.
the room. Yeah.
Truly. It's just like,
Hashtag.
it's Franco. Oh, James Franco's in this. Yeah, this is an anti-Franco pod. Yeah.
There was also I want to talk about the veterinarian, is he a veterinarian? The guy that was like in charge of the monkeys.
Franklin, yes, he was the head scientist who sort of oversaw the chimps.
Yeah, I like his character. I wish there was more of him. And I disliked that he's the one out of everybody that is probably like the most qualified to be in the operating room, that he was the one that lost his mask. I was like, okay. And then he's like the one overweight character that is, then he's like just nothing because then he's going to be killed by this. I was like,
well,
I
do wish he was in it more, and I also wish that his likability was in the Franco character, like because there's that care and compassion, and like obviously he still has to be an egomaniac, like he has to still be super
He
self-centered.
just killed 12 monkeys.
Okay, not by choice. Okay, let's not by choice.
Absolutely, and you see that weight. Right,
yeah.
You get that weight
that
even
moment.
in those two lines.
Yeah, I love that moment where he gives the needle to Franco. He's like, "I'm done. No more for me."
Yeah,
and so you see that humanity, you see that goodness in him. So there's this element of like, oh, I'm rooting for him. Like he's gonna go through some tribulations, he's gonna go through some stuff, but regardless, I've seen the humanity, I've seen the saving of the animal, I've seen the good thing, and now I want more good stuff, and I hope he succeeds. And like if we got more of that with Franco, because I feel like the saving of Caesar by itself is just like a proximity thing. It's not really a choice. It's like a necessity. So for me, that as like the save the cat moment doesn't really resonate as hard. Because like I feel like that's supposed to be what?
I fixed it. We just swapped those actors. Franco is now.
There you go.
And then all of a sudden,
King.
done. Perfect.
Done.
And then James Franco could die of a viral pandemic and we'd all be free.
Perfection. Iconic.
Because even in those like two little scenes, like he, I did really buy that he both cared about all of these animals and, absolutely.
I wanted to touch back on one of the themes with Caesar real quick, just as like something that I'm thinking about as the larger theme, and something that is also echoed in the first one. Just the conversation that we discussed about like existentialism and loneliness, that being like a key pivot for Caesar's entire arc, where he's like trying to find himself. Where does he exist? Where is his place? He's so lonely, so isolated, so on his own, and then finding that community and finding that belonging. Similarly with John Lithgow, the isolation of Alzheimer's, the loneliness of Alzheimer's, like what that does to somebody, and then that in conjunction with James Franco, and him actively losing his father and possibly losing his job, and like the isolation of that, and thinking that maybe he's going to be on his own, and thinking that maybe this is for nothing. Maybe all of this work is nothing. And who even is he in the cog of this machine, in the scope of life? Like the thematic elements of each one of these arcs for each one of these characters, the more I think about it, the more I'm like, yeah, that's like really good. And you see the one character who needs to triumph, which is Caesar. And that is like, it's the most enriching, and it's also the most satisfying to watch. As it unfolds. I just like it because I know that we were talking about that in the first one as far as like the existentialism and loneliness. I wanted to touch on it before I forgot it, because in my head I was like, ooh.
And this movie, it does not feel congratulatory in the way that, because it really is about Caesar. Like we are sitting here like, digging into the little the minutia of the film, which we should be, because that is who we are. But at the end of the day, ultimately, it's a story about Caesar, who is not a character from the originals, is not even really an amalgamation of characters from the originals. He's not really, you can't really tie direct corollaries to any of them. And even though, what's actually ironic is that this movie does have plot elements from one of the sequels. It sort of takes like very light inspiration, because in one of the sequels there is a sort of ape rebellion, so like some people have drawn corollaries to that, but it is so obviously not meant to recreate the story at all. It is meant to be its own original and unique take on the material, and it's just so refreshing. It's so nice. I wish that we did things like this. I wish that we sort of had a bit more integrity and honesty in how we take a look at these previous films or previous IPs in general. I feel like there's sort of two different, like everybody wants to be like either meta like, oh, we understand what these movies were about. Let's do
Matrix.
this.
We're looking
Matrix,
at you.
Matrix. Also, the trailer for the Chippendale reboot thing that came out recently felt
Oh my gosh.
extremely that energy.
Well, Roger Rabbit canon, even.
Yeah, Roger Rabbit canon, though.
I mean, look, it's not our fault that Hollywood loves us and just wants us to keep doing this podcast forever.
True.
Oh my
Yeah.
god. Talk about self-serving. But or instead of being overtly meta, you just pander. You just give people just like, here's like, Dominion is not going to be meta. It's just going to be, here's all the shit you like. And so you can either go
Fast
one of those
10.
two ways. Fast 10
Yeah.
in space.
And I'm here for it. I'm here
Which-
for that.
And so these are the moments where is everything you're saying absolutely correct? True. But because of that, there is this sort of, I feel like full circle where it's like it's now re-entered the realm of like enjoyable but in a obviously silly way, like, which lends into the conversation of camp, right? Like it
Right.
is self-serving, it is silly, it is like taking itself way too seriously, but in like a we understand what we're doing kind of way. I mean, you can't say that for all of this stuff, because I mean, I do want to see the new Jurassic Park. I'm very nervous about it because I do think that like it's either going to be like high camp or an absolute flop, and it's going to be one of the two. Something like Fast 10, genius. Fucking genius. Let's go to space. Let's go to space in a fucking
Fast
Hyundai.
10 is also Fast and the Furious is also kind
I
of
mean,
a bit
they've
of
already
a
been to
unicorn.
space in a Hyundai.
Yeah.
So.
I literally want them rocketing over the moon.
Yes!
in Fast 10.
Go to the moon.
But Fast and the Furious, I will
drift
admit,
around the moon. Drift it.
Fast and the Furious is also kind of a unicorn in this sense because it has completely outlived whatever previous intention they had with the series and has become
Absolutely.
become a complete oddity in its own like
It's-
dumb thing.
Yes.
And
which
it's
is,
because they
oh.
stuck with it. That
Because
they
it's stuck
had
with
this
it. You're
idea,
totally right. Yeah.
fucking stuck with
And
it.
that's the kind of like, because truly it's not like we're taking any of that at face value for like any sort of
Yeah.
whatever. Like there could be elements of it that are gorgeous, but there is the understanding that like this is silly. We know this is silly. Yeah. How do we get here?
Yes, no, I'm tying it back.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
So this
Back- circle
I'm
back.
saying like we have all these different modes of storytelling and franchise storytelling. And so this movie, and that's why ultimately, even with all of its flaws, it will still stand as this really important, special, formative movie for me. And with Dawn especially. And I'm talking about the whole trilogy really, because there really is not a trilogy like this. There is no trilogy in blockbuster storytelling and IP-driven storytelling that is like this. That is not only this divergent from its originals and this insistent on creating a new story. By the time you get to Dawn, by the way, there's really very minimal semblance of Planet of the Apes. But there is a dramatic air to all of them, and they do have this prestige. Like a lot of other attempts at rebooting franchises like this in completely different directions, they're not really going for this kind of like thematic exploration of these concepts. Like I brought up the Jumanji sequels earlier. Like those are not bad movies by any means. I enjoy them immensely, and I think they have some interesting things to say, kind of, sort of, about like you can break into those movies a little bit in terms of like gender and like how they play with. I mean, Jack Black literally plays a straight up white man.
We've 100%.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
we've-
guys
we've
covered
had
these
that
already.
whole
Yeah,
talk.
you
Yeah.
talked about this already. Yeah, so those are kind of interesting, but they're not aiming for a commentary. I don't think these movies are really. Those movies do not have the same kind of aim. Again, we talk about intentionality versus just what you sort of draw. I don't think the filmmakers made Jack Black play a straight up white chick and was looking for like, let's talk about gender. Like, I don't think that's what they were trying.
Oh, that was the
No.
most regressive thing.
It was
Yeah.
it was so bad.
No. So I don't think they were trying to do that, but you can have a discussion about it, but that's not the intention. But this movie feels like they are trying to channel some elements of the original film, but just take it in a very, very different light and be like, and in my opinion, a far more, well, not far more, but in a much more progressive light in the sense of let's take this story and put it on the disenfranchised person in the story. I mean, I'm talking about Caesar, not James Franco. Let's talk about this story from the perspective of the marginalized character, and let's watch those characters triumph in this beautiful, a bit more storytelling, traditional kind of
I
way.
do also
I-
like that we
yeah.
know that they are going to win, and that like by it being a Planet of the Apes film, we know that Caesar is going to get justice and that humanity is doomed, because why would we want to save it at this point? So I like watching this knowing that, like, okay, cool, this is going to happen. Like, there is hope.
Yeah.
You know what
But
I
at
mean?
what
Whereas,
cost,
like,
Jessica?
something...
At what cost? We lost our poor Buck. We lost
Yeah.
Buck, our fallen brother.
I mean, he died for the cause.
He died for the cause. But can I also say, similarly to the first film, it is not this happy, beautiful ending. The ending of Rise is this. It is very similarly to the first film, like kind of this like quiet acceptance kind of although it's different in the sense that in the original film it's like the world stays the same, and in this new film the world is different. The world has changed. Everything has changed, but it's not like Caesar doesn't even technically really get what he wants. I mean, he fucks up a bunch of police, like that's cool, but like Caesar does free the apes, but like it's very clear that is not like period, end of sentence. Like it's not like this like moment of pure conclusion, because he knows there's so much more. He knows that he has opened up a can of worms to a much larger thing, and the movie ends on the note of James Franco just sort of understanding that he's created a monster, basically, and Caesar being like, okay, we're starting the journey now. Like this is it.
The movie ends at the beginning.
Yeah,
That's the whole. Yeah. Which is fascinating, because again, as like a true reimagining of what one would call a prequel to the Planet of the Apes, which again we've discussed why that isn't really true, but like in this context, it's perfect because it literally starts at the beginning, or it ends at the beginning. Yeah. Like the beginning of what we know this IP to be to some degree, or like what happens later, everything that leads to how it starts, boom. Now they're ready. Now they're on the treetops. They're looking at the city. The world is our oyster. Here we go.
And
Brilliant.
I think that's one of the best things about this being, like you were talking about, like a reimagining, is because the first one was so vague. Like, and that's what I think I really miss about a lot of sci-fi. And I think that sci-fi is at its best when it doesn't explain things, when it drops you in this world, and then you kind of have to fill in the pieces, or, you know, just accept what it is yourself, right? Where Planet of the Apes was, we are here, and humans are inferior now. Apes talk and have a societal structure and their own religion. And holy shit, this was Earth the whole time. We don't get to understand how the Earth got this way. We don't understand why this is called the Forbidden Zone. We don't understand, like, I mean, they are like just on this very, very small part of New York where there's a whole fucking world out there. What the fuck happened? This is so far into the future that presumably like no written text has survived. You'll never be able to reconcile what happened. And that's what I like about this. And I think what makes it work as a prequel is it can't be bogged down by the original at all, because they are two completely separate things and two completely separate stories.
I mean, it is just so telling, because really Caesar's story is the story of this film. Like, that's the reason this movie exists. And it is the most interesting part of the story. Again, all the Franco heads out there, we're really sorry, but like anytime it cuts back is a mess. We stick with Caesar. It's going to be great. And I 100% agree with that. It has everything to do with.
So Eric and I are prepared when we watch
Andy
the other
Serkis
two,
and how good he is.
How much is Franco in there?
He is, well, first of all, he is not a major character at all in the sequels.
Perfect. That's all I need to hear. Done.
Yes, he does have a brief. He is in archival footage featured in Dawn, I believe, but he is not actually physically in the movie.
Perfect. Incredible.
Yeah.
Excellent.
No, that's why I think you need to watch Dawn, because it is again I think that Rise was their proof that this story can work, and Dawn was them going fully into the rabbit hole of like the possibilities of this story.
Cool.
So please watch it. And then War is like, if you wanted your Prisoner of War ape movie, you got it with War. Like, it is shockingly depressing and nihilistic, but also has Woody Harrelson. Really incredible movie as well. The entire trilogy, I could have a whole podcast dedicated to how important the reboot trilogy is, and how, again, there really is nothing like this that is as good as it is. And that's why you needed to cover it on your show.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, so we made it back from the Planet of the Apes in the year 3000. Eric,
Yes.
who was this film for?
Charlton Heston, period. It was for him. It was for his ego, maybe. Also, it was for the iconic damn you, God damn you to hell. I mean, we need that. We need that scene. We need that scene in the zeitgeist. We need it. And so that's why this movie was made. We need it.
What about you, Larry?
This was for whoever designed the costumes for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles because they saw the chin straps and were like, "That's it, we did it." By the way, that was Jim Henson. That guy. It was for Jim. It was for Jim Henson. I think. Yeah.
I mean that iconic meme of like the light hitting the actor a little bit and you see their eyes in the mouth of.
Yes.
It's so scary.
Yes.
It's so scary.
It is just. By the way, Jim Henson close to my heart. So all the love for Jim Henson. But this movie was for Jim Henson.
Yeah. Jess, who do you
Okay.
think it was for?
Well, I can't think of a better answer than that because I also love Jim Henson so fucking much. So, and this absolutely was for Charlton Heston. So, I'm gonna say both of your answers are absolutely correct, and I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Can I just say, by the way, I don't know explicitly if Jim Henson designed the chin straps. I know that he worked on the costumes and he worked on the puppetry of that movie. I don't know whoever designed the chin straps. This movie is for you. I don't want to drag Jim Henson's name in the mud if I'm not being accurate. I love you, Jim.
I mean, but Jim Henson was involved, so
He was definitely involved. Here we
we
are.
are. Eric, did you
Yes.
like the 1968 Planet of the Apes?
I did. I think it's a movie I'm glad I saw because I do think that it is a classic in the most classic sense. Like, I do think that it stands as like one of these pillars of cinema for all the correct reasons, obviously the nuances of whatever. I liked it a lot. I think it's a fantastic film, and I'm really glad I watched it.
How about you, Larry?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think that this movie is so complex, and it stands as a really fascinating product of an era in which filmmakers were really able to explore politically all that they wanted to, and all of society's underpinnings, and all of the dark topics we didn't want to talk about. Like Jess, as you said, sci-fi is a place for filmmakers to explore society and society at large and the problems with society in a much more fascinating way. And this movie is a product of that, and I dig it a whole lot.
Absolutely. I also like it. I was much more entertained than I thought I would be. Sometimes going back to older films can be a little bit tough. And for some reason, I just had it in my head that this was boring. Again, Tim Burton really fucked me up. But
God damn it, Tim Burton.
but I watched it. I liked it. I'm glad that I watched it, especially because we all know that I love sci-fi. Thank you very much. So yeah, I'm really glad that I watched it, and I did like it a lot more than I thought I was going to. Now, dun dun dun, present day San Francisco. We're here with Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Eric, was this new, interesting, or the same, or progressive, regressive? How are you feeling?
I think it was new and interesting in everything that we discussed is the way that they've told this story that is both a part of the canon but also its own completely separate story. It's a story that could exist outside of the rules and the world of Planet of the Apes, but I thought it was progressive also just in the way that they centered Caesar, the disenfranchised character, in this way. Yeah, I thought it was new, interesting, and progressive. I mean, granted, again, anti-Franco gang rise up because we need to get him out of there. Absolutely.
Which he
absolutely
is in the
not.
next two. So
Yes. So thankfully, big anti-Franco file over here.
Anti-Franco
file. That's me. So with that in mind, yes, I do think it was new, interesting, and progressive.
What about you, Larry?
Oh, y'all already know. Very new, very interesting. I do think it's very progressive. I mean, I will admit that both of these movies have women problems and do not treat their female characters with the same levels of integrity as their male characters. Fully aware of that. That being said, also a movie about men's follies. So, there's a lot of men doing bad things too. So it does even out, but it is progressive in the sense that it is, and I think that a lot of reboots can learn from this. Are there characters from a previous reboot or in your previous IP, in the original IPs, was there a character that was marginalized or was maybe not in the sort of not the straight white male cis sort of archetype that deserves to have their perspective told, right? And I think that's kind of what this movie did in a very different sense. You know, it took the ape perspective, the chimp perspective. It was like, let's tell the story from the perspective of the other party, and let's put them in a position where they are the ones who have to triumph over the evils of men, not just everybody's horrible, but rather let's try to make this story about one person and try to make those lines a little bit clearer. So in that sense, I do think it is a bit more progressive because it decides to put the perspective in much more marginalized hands.
Yeah, totally. I agree. I think that this was new and interesting. I also think it was the same in terms of the parallels that we talked about between characters. But it was the same in incredibly subtle ways where we only know because we watched them with intent and are now discussing it on this podcast. So I think that was actually done really well, which generally it's not. So that was a treat. I also think that it was progressive in terms of, even though it didn't do right by its female characters, at least they were speaking. And also they were the voice that was trying to, rather than being there to uphold the cis white man and his voice and his perspective, they were trying to recenter the conversation on the marginalized, on Caesar, right? So, like, I think that was progressive. Did it go far enough? Absolutely fucking not. But there we are, folks. That's where we are.
Progress, yeah.
But yeah, I did really enjoy the recentering of the marginalized group, and rather than just, and I liked that Franco was an asshole and was kind of bad and not a good person. And so, yeah, I thought that was cool.
Yeah.
Eric, who is it for?
Francophiles. And by that I mean people who like James Franco. No, it was for. It's a really good movie, 100%. But James Franco was way too much in it, and I did not like it. So I'm gonna be shitty, and I'm gonna say people who like James Franco.
What about you, Larry?
This is made for me. This movie's made. This is my movie.
This is your movie.
It's also made for people who are tired of the legacy sequels. And who are looking for an actually interesting, unique take on an IP-driven reboot. Here you go. Here is your good fucking food. Please eat.
I'm going to say this movie is for people that are fed up with humanity and just want to see it get fucked up.
Yeah.
I'm sure that also resonates through the rest of the trilogy. Which I am pretty excited to watch. I will be honest, I didn't think that I was going to come out of this still wanting to watch the others. But after talking about it, you did change my mind. So
yes.
Thank you.
Apes trilogy, Apes reboot trilogy, high rise. Can I also say this movie's also for Buck, my boy.
Yeah.
Pour one out for Buck, all right? He gave his life for the cause.
He did.
We all my homies love Buck, all right?
Oh, man. Eric, did you like the movie?
I did. I thought it was great.
Larry?
I thought it was all right. It's fine.
It was fine.
It's fine.
Jess, what do you think?
Yeah, I liked it. I thought it was entertaining just watching it. But I liked it a lot more after talking about it with the both of you.
Agreed. Yeah.
I feel
like talking about it with you, Larry. I like it more.
Yeah.
Having discussed it.
That's what passion does, man. People are passionate about their favorite movies, and you're like, oh yeah, no, this actually is good.
Yeah.
Thank
Totally.
God, because I was like, I could sense that y'all were ready to rip into this movie, and I was like, please don't hurt me.
I mean, granted, there are lots of plot holes and things to rip
Yeah,
into,
yeah,
but I think
nope, yep, mhm.
overarchingly, I do think that I think that it had really solid bones and really just needed a little bit of nuance in certain characters and a different main actor, please.
Yeah.
Honestly, the movie moves too quickly for me to recognize them. Like, the movie is like just story central at one point.
Yeah.
And so at one point, like, oh, plot, no, there's that. No, okay, we're already moving.
scooting.
Okay, yeah, we're scooting. We're moving.
We're over here now.
Yeah,
We're over
we've moved. Well, I think that brings us to the end. Larry, thank you so much for coming on here and spending your entire evening with us talking about Planet of the Apes. What an absolute goddamn treat!
I
it
mean,
was.
I mean, I knew I was going to be an exploding barrel of love for these movies, and I am so thankful that you did not cover these movies yet, and that you could have me here to talk about them, because I do really enjoy the original Planet of the Apes very much, and I do this movie is very near and dear to my heart. So it was a pleasure to be here and talk about it, and y'all are so great.
So are you.
So funny.
So speaking of you being great and awesome, where can people find your stuff?
Oh, that's a great question, Eric. For those who don't know, my name is Larry Freed, and I'm the host and creator of a podcast. It's called My Favorite Movie Is. It's a podcast dedicated to helping filmmakers and storytellers make somebody's next favorite film. We sit down and talk to other filmmakers and storytellers, talk to them about their all-time favorite movie or whatever comes closest, and through their experiences and how those films changed their lives, we as filmmakers and storytellers articulate techniques and mindsets that we can use to change other people's lives through film in the same vein. My podcast is available wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the whole 9 yards. We're also on Anchor if you use that. And we're also on YouTube. Check us out on there. And we are at the time of this recording, we are currently on hiatus. However, in April, we plan on being back and having some awesome new episodes released on a weekly basis. And who knows? You might see one of these two characters on the show one of these days. Who knows?
Whoa.
Maybe.
Teasing.
I mean, I have only been waiting to talk about Josie and the Pussycats my entire life. Also, okay, look, it was between Josie and the Pussycats and Spice World, because I love both of those equally and for almost the exact same reason.
What a double header.
Yeah.
Incredible.
So
iconic.
Those two movies I could talk about forever. Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for being with us. We really appreciate you and your time. Thank you to everybody listening at home.
Please don't forget to rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts, and follow us on social media. Give us some stars. Give us some love. You love us, and we love you. Mwah.
Our artwork and music is by Eric Lefebvre. Good God.
Ooh, that's a good one. Obsessed.
Oh, my
First
God.
time I messed that up.
Phoebe.
Oh, my God.
Ooh.
I'm going to call you that from now on. Okay, no,
I'll take it.
Artwork and music is by Eric Lefebvre, editing by Danny Barkley, and thank you again for listening. And thank you, Eric and
Thank you,
Larry.
Jess. Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Jess.
Thank you, Jess. Thank you, Eric. This was so much fun.
And
Thank you so
remember,
much.
stay cute.
And stay critical. Goodbye. This podcast has been brought to you by the NOTstalgia Network.
Visit thenotStalgiaNetwork.com for more.
You enter the dungeon and see the evil wizard pointing his wand directly at you. He says, "Show me a funny and delightful actual play Dungeons & Dragons podcast, or I'll consume your souls!" What do?
I take out my phone and find Quest Friends Forever on Spotify.
I show him how to find Quest Friends Forever on Apple Podcasts.
I share the Quest Friends Forever Instagram and YouTube pages with him.
And you all get critical hits!
Yay!
Quest Friends Forever is an actual play podcast starring 4 friends with varying levels of Dungeons & Dragons experience. Join us for new episodes every other Wednesday as we embark on fantasy adventures, play fast and loose with the rules, and laugh at each other's shenanigans. No prior D&D knowledge is required to listen, so everyone can feel free to join the fun. Quest Friends 4, that's the number 4, like how there's 4 of us, ever. Find us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. That's Quest Friends Forever.